Oof. Boy, I'm going to need some classic music for this one. Okay, well, gaslighting. Defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, uncertainty of one's emotional and mental stability, yada yada yada, and a dependency on the predator. See, as a fan of almost anything that is gaming, it's unfortunate that we can apply this definition on most of our entertainment industry. The literal one thing in the world that makes me have the biggest of boomer takes. It wasn't like this when I was younger. There are those companies that keep telling us the single-player experiences aren't what the players want, and when we ask them, "What's in the box?" they promptly reply,
Thanks. Those are surprise mechanics. Very useful to us, but not so much to you. But you'll find out when you open the box.
Others who get mad at the customer's refusal to partake in their greedy tactics.
I'm sorry, what the hell is this? An NFT. Did you seriously try to sell me a picture? Yep. That I can find on the internet. What's wrong with you?
They'll try to gaslight us as best as they can, all the while we all clearly can see what is going on. One solution will of course be to take accountability for one's actions and to apologize correctly, but unfortunately, as we've grown accustomed to, the disposition that they most likely opt to do is to blaming on the others, that being us, and of course claim that it did an oopsie. We'll talk about Ubisoft another day, because today we have to focus on Dungeons & Dragons. D&D. No game is more synonymous with the word than D&D. You know when you walk into a bookstore pretending to look for some serious literature, but you are actually there to see what latest iteration of Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh are popular? Yeah, we can all associate to that. And then you stumble on one of those die with a gajillion size and ask yourself, what the hell is even that? Where is this example getting at? Well, Dungeons & Dragons is by far the most recognizable tabletop fantasy role-playing game out there. Oh, you spend how many pounds on your army of well-oiled, chiseled, golden custodians? Well, scooch over, this ain't no D&D. Oh shit, you got a new Cyberpunk Red. Well, wake the fuck up, samurai, we got some dragons to fuck. I got a line from a mate from our D&D club in university. He was like,
Although you're playing an ogre, you cannot fuck a dragon. What do you mean I can fuck the dragon? You can polymorph.
Shout out to you, Andreas, 2019. Miss you, man. It may well be that you've never played a D&D campaign to its fullness, but you have most certainly come across it in some sort of media, with things like Freaks and Geeks, Community, Stranger Things, and of course, like many have asked me to watch the show and react to it, but I've already watched the show, The Legend of Vox Machina, from the good old folks at Critical Role. These all spun out of the 5th edition of the game that was released in around 2014, which simplified and streamlined the play. This resulting in D&D becoming more of a lifestyle brand than a rule set. Now, once you got into D&D, you would have realized that there are two types of fans. Generally, people like to call them the new school and the old school, but I prefer to define them as the serious players and like the casual players. Those we otherwise call homebrewers. That being, of course, if you go according to the definition of Gary Gygax, one of his co-founders, which according to this transcript that I found from 1975, thank you Dungeons & Dragons, the Knowledge Compendium, soft freaking old website style, quoted the co-creator as basically supporting the individualistic interpretation of the game's rules, basically turning the game into the D&D that most of us will be familiar with. You make the rules to fit the adventure you like. Like nothing here adheres to something like dogmatic that you can't change, is not normative. As the 70s ended and the satanic craze that also followed D&D went with it,
Hellfire isn't a cult, it's a club for nerds.
by 1982 there was a little bit of a dispute between the two creators, well, mostly from Gary's side, who wanted to take away the royalties from Dave. It is here that he would flip-flop on the thought that he had back in 75, in like a weird way to assert dominance over Dave Anderson. Yeah, pretty sus. At this point, he would basically define that anybody who did not play D&D according to the rule set that was sent by TNR would by definition not be considered as real D&D players. Translated in today's situation, you would in fact be dependent on the material, or i.e. the book set produced by WotC, Wizards of the Coast, to be defined as a D&D enjoyer. Alright, this defines things pretty clearly, right? You have the serious players and the filthy casual. Moving then from shows like Stranger Things or Freaks and Geeks to that one time they decided to make an abysmal Dungeons and Dragons movie. I have so much hope for the 2022 version, it looks good. D&D has become extremely popular, it's getting referenced in every sort of media, and for that reason there needs to be a way to commercialize it very well. Enter the OGL, or the Open Game License, a public copyright license by WotC, released during the 3rd edition, that granted certain liberties to its owner. Notably, it says here that in consideration for agreeing to use this license, the contributors grant you a perpetual, worldwide, royalty-free, non-exclusive license with the exact term of this license to use the open game content. This is version 1.0a of the OGL, the document that has allowed many companies over the last 2 decades to produce adventures, spin-offs, games, and etc. that revolved around the D&D verse. They would be able to do essentially what they wanted without having to pay any royalties, that being as long as they relied on the open game content. Now, what is open game content? For this, we need to consult the SRD, or System Reference Document, wherein they describe what is considered to be open game content. It is a 403 pages long document, but we don't need to go through all of it because most of it kind of only defines what is within the adventures and the books. But we only need to check out the first 2 pages because those do have the legal stuff. This includes a list of characters, creatures, and setting that are not to be touched. So, can you use the name Mordenkainen without having to pay royalties?
No.
How about the Mind Flayer?
No.
Field of Elysium?
No.
Okay, I can stop here. You get the point. You could create D&D adjacent things, still using fireballs, whatever you want, but don't mention a certain subset of creatures, characters, and spells. Now, for companies, this was amazing because despite the changes in different editions, like for example the 4th edition that was absolutely draconian, you could create a lot of things without having to fear for many restrictions. And for creators who weren't doing anything with like any commercial intent, like a YouTuber or streamer who would live stream the campaign of D&D, you were pretty much in the clear. You didn't need to expect WotC to just ram into your door at night and pull out the bell that okay, that's too much. And even if you were such a good boy and asked for permission to use the content on your channel, wink wink, the devs will tell you that you didn't even need to ask permission.
Like as a game, my game designer answer is if people want to play Dungeon World on Twitch, they should never have to ask me for permission. Like that's not, you don't ask the person who made the paint if you're allowed to paint something with it, right? Like we make a toolbox for telling stories, and you don't have to ask us if you're allowed to tell your story to a broader audience. It's about IP though. It's like when you want to start showing assets on stream. Like I don't care about if you want to show the art from Dungeon World. If you're like, it's an elf and it looks like this, that's cool. But when it gets into like a bigger thing, it depends on what you're sharing, right? Sharing copyrighted art on stream can be a problem. You know, some games have a less permissive structure around like showing their rules. But I mean, to be fair, the Dungeons and Dragons of today is not the Dungeons and Dragons of the late 90s where you couldn't even make a website without getting yelled at by a lawyer. It's a very permissive space. You can ask, but I tend to lean on the side of like you're doing something that promotes the game that you're playing, and if you go to them and say like, hey, is it cool for us to do this free advertising for you? And they're like, no. Just play a different game. They don't deserve your attention.
Now, the only time where a companies like WotC, which is, by the way, not exclusive to them, could ever come and change your content or straight up remove it would be by issuing a DMCA, and that would be, of course, be caused by you doing something completely crazy. Now, as much as I like D&D, I only had so much opportunity in the 3 years where I went to university to sit in a room radiating with so much nerd energy that I could truly understand what many fans felt. However, what I can sympathize with is what happened a year prior to this with GW Games Workshop, who had a similar blunder and who are still continuing to do that with loot boxes and whatnot. And let me not get onto tangent, like, I can understand kind of the frustration that is going on. Now, with the background set on the whole situation with the D&D community, what actually happened to set fans in an uproar? Well, let's start with statement made last year by December 23rd by Cynthia Williams, the CEO of Wizards of the Coast, during the UBS virtual fireside chat. She said the following: D&D has never been more popular, and we have really great fans and engagement, but the brand is really under-monetized. Really? Now, in doing some light searches on the internet, I found certain articles that were cooperating with the story, with this one pointing out that Wizards, which also owns Magic the Gathering, topped at $1.2 billion in revenue in 2021, which is about 20% of Hasbro, you know, the toy company's total net revenue for the year. By looking straight into the documents filed for the third quarter earnings of Hasbro, we get to paint a clearer picture, where despite a small decrease in total earnings for the year from the point of view of Wizards of the Coast, sorting for the digital gaming net revenues by category of tabletop gaming and digital license gaming totals, we see that there is a decrease of 9% and 37% respectively, that being in comparison to the year prior. And perhaps maybe this is the cause that forced them to overreact and push forth this new OGL, but you would imagine that this is something that they had planned for quite some time. Now, to William's point, the issue of under-monetization would have been related to those two types of players that I mentioned before. As she points out that the casual player isn't actually spending much money on the franchise at all, because why would you? You get your sheet of paper, a note block to take notes for what is going on, and you play the game with your friends. On the other hand, then you have the one who is usually the serious player, your Eddie Munson, who is the DM, Dungeon Master, who would own the guidebooks and would usually be the one to spend most money on the hobby. So if you are the type to organize the settings and set challenges for players to face, you would be amongst the 20% of the player base which WotC claims produce most of the revenue. So now you've heard two of the three critical keywords: under-monetized, revenue, and the third one would be greed. Not the one you're thinking about, but that's the one you get. Because with the acquisition of a D&D digital toolset created in 2017 called D&D Beyond, a virtual companion to the tabletop experience similar to something like Roll20, where through a free or subscription-based service, one could create characters, manage stats, share compendium, and all the good things that are in a D&D campaign, WotC and Hasbro, we're gonna put them in the same box, have gotten their hands on a wonderful digital cash cow, cashing in on that online tabletop space, that virtual gaming, that NFT, god damn it, oh man. They thought to themselves, we can crank it up to 11. But that's not the worst part of it. With that talk that they had in December, they decided to change the most important document that has allowed so many to thrive, being that open gaming license. Now, many who had ever had a look at the original OGL would have asked themselves, can they actually do that? Isn't it perpetual? Well, yes and no. Okay, remember that SRD, System Reference Document, that we talked about a few minutes ago? In its section 9, it states that Wizard or its designated agent may publish updated version of this license. You, being the content creator, may use any authorized version of this license to copy, modify, and distribute any open game content originally distributed under any version of this license. So even if they were to change the OGL and make it worse, you could always just revert back to use version 1.0a. By hearing that, everyone who's ever played Pathfinder is going like, yeah boy, it's time to oil up. Okay, cast a sign on your roaches because it's about to get stupid. In changing to this new OGL, version 1.1, a 20-page document that the internet was very quick to leak had within it a reversal to the royalty-free element of the OGL. Yep, the updated license will come with a new requirement for making commercial content of D&D. Those making about $50,000 per year from such content will be required to report that revenue to WotC. Wait, did I just say DeLoreans? While those making above $750,000 per year would have to start paying a royalty on excess revenue above that threshold starting in 2024. And if there were any doubts whatsoever of this being real or not, because oh, it's leaked document, we never know. They actually did contact Kickstarter because there was a different margin of like change between 20 and 25% of that threshold that they had to be paying. Journalist Linda Codega, who was reportedly the first one to have received these leaked documents, confirmed that these were inside knowledge from the employees themselves. So they actually sent out contracts to creators, giving them a 10-day notice to change the policies and business strategies. It's insane. Now, this is clearly very stupid, but
Wait! There's more!
because one of the caveats is that the company, as if they had an overruling power of the DMCA, can modify or terminate the agreement for any reason whatsoever, provided a 30-day notice. So, Watsy Hasbro pretty much turned into bloody Cartman, like,
I'll do what I want.
now listen, I can understand that the company is going to shake things up a little bit, take a hiatus, taking a break and working on something like Riot Games releasing a abysmally bad cinematic, which some people claim actually helped them with the New Year resolution because they look forward to it every year. What? Starving your audience a little bit for content because you are actually working on something good. But what is inexcusable is that the thing that you've been working on is something that's going to hold them at a stranglehold because you consider them being nothing but an obstacle to earning more money. Naturally, this set the D&D community at an uproar, with more than 60,000 people signing an open letter to address the matter. Additionally, with the trend of the hashtag D&D Begone, a reported 40,000 subscribers left D&D Beyond altogether. As aforementioned, the 20-page document that has the new OGL was something that was leaked, and Hasbro or Watsy had not come out with an official statement. But while waiting for all of this, some companies decided to do something about it. For an instance, the Pathfinder series creator Paizo decided to move forward and make their own goddamn license. Naturally, this was announced on Twitter with the following: "We have announced a plan for a system-neutral open RPG license in collaboration with other game companies. We believe it will irrevocably and unquestionably keep alive the spirit of open game license. The new open RPG creative license will be built system-agnostic for independent game publishers under the legal guidance of Azora Law, an intellectual property law firm that represents Paizo and several other game publishers. Paizo will pay for this legal work. We invite game publishers worldwide to join us in the support of this system-agnostic license that allow all games to provide their own unique open rule reference document to open up their individual game system to the world. The ORC will not be owned by Paizo, nor will it be owned by any company who make money publishing RPGs. Azora Law's ownership of the process and stewardship should provide a safe harbor against any company being bought, sold, or changing management in the future and attempting to rescind rights or nullify sections of license. Ultimately, we plan to find a non-profit with a history of open source values to own this license." Truly a shining light in the sea of shit that we find ourselves in. I don't think that analogy actually works. We also had Critical Role chiming in with their response to the matter, but this one left people more puzzled than anything, as it mentioned how creative freedom was the one thing that allowed them to create their own publishing company some years ago, and affirming the company's commitment to fostering an environment that allows everyone the opportunity to easily share their stories as they see fit, and it didn't say much. It felt a lot as if they were tiptoeing around a contractual obligation that didn't allow them to say much, but I guess they're saying something is better than nothing. There was, however, the CEO of an esport company that I am not familiar with who claimed that Critical Role is designing their own game system. We'll have to wait and see if that is true or not. Which then brings us to WotC and Dungeons & Dragons, who after days of silence finally decided to issue an apology/response that made them sound as if they had taken a masterclass from the EA school of gaslighting. A response which, unlike my changing clothing, surprised no one. I rolled a 10 this weekend and couldn't edit the video in time, but it gave me the good opportunity to fact check some stuff and boy, it got so much worse. The response that they issued was pretty comical from the get-go, as the art that they used for that article featured the magic card equivalent of Yu-Gi-Oh's No Entry bar the gate, a card with the flavor text "This path is close to you," leaving things open to interpretation as some sort of mockery towards the community. One could argue that this was not the intent, but leaving things up to interpretation seems to be what they have been going for from the very beginning of this issue. Now, in the response supposedly issued by the D&D Beyond staff, they set things off with 3 points. First, they claimed that by issuing a new OGL, they wanted the ability to prevent the use of D&D content from being included into hateful and discriminatory product, which, if you've been following so far, is something that they could have already done away with through the use of DMCAs. By the way, I'm not saying that DMCAs are a good thing whatsoever, right? Because they tend to be abused, but it is wholly within the power of a company to do that. Second was them claiming that they wanted to ward the content from Web3, blockchain, and NFTs, as the OGL's content should be limited to tabletop roleplaying only. And then again, this is false, but we know that for some years now they have been opting to make some NFTs out of the arts from both Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gatherings, who, by the way, have some cards that are only meant to be for display. And the third was that they wanted to assure that the OGL was for the ones on the bottom of the totem pole, that being the content creators, the homebrewers, the aspiring designers, and the players, the community as a whole, not for the major corporations. This again is a weird statement for them to make, as the old OGL was already cherished for the small content creator and as well as the big corporations. But obviously they are making these moves because they saw that they were losing money and thus wanted to catch in on that piece of the pie. As they continued to engage in more apologetic, they claimed that the leaked document that the whole world got to see was in fact nothing but a draft, and that it was the reason as to why it had the provision it did. That the draft language was provided to content creators and publishers so to get their feedback.
Oh my god.
Claiming that document that they sent out to companies with an issued 10 days notice for changing the whole business strategy, or else was drafts. Bullshit! But it doesn't end there, for while they did claim that the new OGL will not work retroactively, meaning that content already released on the version 1.0a would remain unaffected, and also that content that were educational, charitable, such as livestream and YouTube, cosplay, all that stuff, would remain unaffected, in the final thought, they did the biggest self-report that I have ever seen. You're going to hear people say that they won, and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plans. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we.
Are you stupid or something?
I wanted to take a sip from my drink, but I'm empty now. I'm down like 2 liters trying to record this. Since that response came out, D&D Beyond and Wizard have been suffering blows after blows, with a multitude of leaks coming out. Like this one showing that the company was trying to recoup their losses through the increase of the subscription service of D&D Beyond, raising it to a $30 a month per player, which in comparison to a similar tool, Roll20, is $49 per year or $100 for a pro subscription. Jesus Christ, these prices are high. Now, for those who are subscribed to the channel, some of you would understand why it is that I'm covering this on the channel. As I've mentioned, something similar happened with Games Workshop last year, and it was a story that had been ongoing for quite some time, with creators receiving cease and desist for their creative work, and some others deciding for their own safety to discontinue some of the most creative work that I have ever seen. In a similar light, WotC had all of these companies working in an ecosystem that was thriving, and suddenly making it change into something that can just be altered on a whim is obviously dangerous. And I think that it is important to remember that when this happens one place, it usually just happens everywhere, because if I can borrow some of that answer's posturing, the companies, well, at least the executives, don't really care about the core games. They don't care about the community. Their job is simply to make a profit for the companies, and will continue to do as they see fit if we don't hold them accountable. This whole situation made me think of not just the GW situation, but also sort of what happened with the whole Warner Brothers patent situation, what they had with the Nemesis system. They successfully patented a method of gaming, which is not supposed to be a thing, but it was successful for them. And surely a company like Ubisoft, who created the Nemesis system in Assassin's Creed Odyssey or something similar in Watch Dogs Legion, could contest with them in court. But if you are a small creator, you're going to have the fear of God struck into you, because just the simple thought of having to invest in those code processes is going to scare you. So in the spirit of keeping games less homogeneous, more creative, and away from a cycle of insane monetization practices, it's important to keep these companies accountable and keep the pressure on. So that is pretty much why I am sharing this as well on the channel. That said, hopefully you got a bit more of an insight of what was going on with this whole OGL and D&D situation, and yeah, let me know your thoughts on it. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be covering D&D for the rest of the channel, don't worry about that. There are a bunch of games though that are inspired from it, like Baldur's Gate, that's supposed to be coming out this year officially. We'll see that in the future. That said though, I wish you all to have a wonderful day. See you guys in the next video. Bye.